Welcome to the Romancing Like Swift podcast, where we talk craft and the business of being an author while fangirling over Taylor Swift. We're your hosts, Morgana Bevan
and Emily Jane. On this podcast, we'll discuss what authors can learn from Taylor Swift. There are many amazing Taylor Swift podcasts in existence. We know this, but our focus is on mining Taylor Swift's lyrics and business practices for tips to help our fellow authors excel in their careers.
Today, we're talking about how Taylor crafts microfiction with her songs and what we can learn about how to create a narrative arc.
So, as always, a quick reminder of who we are. I am Emily Jane. I also write as Emily McKay, and I am a total craft nerd, so most of the craft topics come from me.
And I'm Morgana Bevan. I'm a Welsh steamy romance author that focuses on celebrity romance, He Falls First tropes. I write majorly rockstar and after romances, and I am currently traveling Southeast Asia. And I am also the marketing business nerd. So all of those topics come from me.
And this is a great opportunity because we can learn from one another. I'm learning so much already just from hanging out with Morgana and hearing her talk about stuff, even outside of the podcast. So I think an important lesson that all authors need to learn is that we are in this together. And as soon as you start making friends with fellow authors and learning from them, you have a leg up.
Exactly. Half of this craft stuff, I have no idea. I just do it and don't understand what I'm doing. So I'm learning so much from Emily and these topics and now starting to figure out where I put them in my own books.
Nice. So many authors do all the craft stuff instinctually, but it's nice to be able to have conversations about it and then do things intentionally as well.
Yeah, my friend Gabrielle Sands, she's discovered she's the type of person that likes to know. She wants to know the exact formula of a piece of craft so that she can build her books to hit that formula every time. And she manufactured best-selling mafia romances as a result. We met up in Bath last year and she was telling me how she literally spent weeks reading all the bestsellers, going through all the craft, dissecting everything before she relaunched herself. And now she's a six-figure author. So clearly knowing the craft has benefit if you're a plotter.
Yes. Well, and on the topic of plotter versus pantser, and if you're coming to this as a Taylor Swift fan, let's just explain. Plotter is someone who plots their books out as their writer, and pantser is someone who writes by the seat of their pants.
And there is amalgamation in the middle as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I am actually somewhere in that middle zone, but actually way closer to pantser. I will always make the argument that understanding the craft doesn't mean you have to use it intentionally. You understand it, and then it becomes part of your psyche. It becomes part of your brain soup. And then when you write by the seat of your pants, you do it better. The other descriptive for writing by the seat of your pants is flying into the mist. And I always say that even if you fly into the mist, you still know how to fly the plane. So it's not that you know exactly where you're going, but you know all the tools at your disposal as you are flying the plane into the mist.
Very true. That's interesting because I've always thought of craft being instinctual to me. I don't know what anything is called and I can't identify it, but I just do it. And then somebody else will point it out to me. But I am also a pantser/plantser, like I'm in the middle zone. I like knowing vaguely what's coming, but if I know exact specifics, I get bored. Already told myself the story. So it's interesting then to think that you can learn craft and still use it as a pantser.
Yeah. I absolutely think those two things are true at the same time. You can learn craft and you can use it as a pantser, and being able to analyze other people's books and being like, oh yeah, no, that was really cool that they did that. And that's definitely how I do it.
So should we jump into this week's topic?
I think so. So this week we're going to be talking about how a lot of Taylor Swift songs are micro stories and they have a distinctive narrative arc. And I'm going to break down what I mean when I say narrative arc. And also, I want to say first that I'm specifically talking about the arc in genre fiction. We both write romance novels, so we're firmly genre fiction writers. But genre fiction, that also applies to mystery, sci-fi, fantasy. I don't read horror because I'm a total wimp, so I have no idea if this applies to horror or not. Morgana, do you read horror? Is this something we haven't talked about?
No, I'm very prone to nightmares and I don't need help.
Yeah, yeah. Me too. I have enough horror nightmares without actually reading horror. I've been known to, like, on the occasional time I go see a scary movie, actually scream aloud repeatedly in the theater, and people laugh at me. So we won't be talking about horror today as a genre, but we will be talking about, these definitely apply to romance, mystery, sci-fi, and fantasy. When I say narrative arc, what I mean is the arc of justice. This is a term that I learned from my friend Sherry Thomas, who is the author of the Lady Sherlock books. And she talks about fiction delivering the shortened arc of justice, which may be a bit confusing, but I'm going to pause, I guess, and ask the question of, why do we read genre fiction?
I read it to escape, to experience things I don't want to experience in real life, or to test out things I want to experience in real life.
For me, I read it because I want the guaranteed happily ever after. Is that not part of it for you?
Yes, but I also like that angst. I'm the 75% give me the soul destroying breakup person, because I don't just live for the happily ever after. I live for the soul destroying breakup, and when I don't get it, I don't feel fulfilled.
Right. But if you got only
Oh yeah.
the soul destroying breakup and no happily ever after,
Yeah, I need the two.
right? You've got to have both. Whether the breakup is soul destroying or not, you have to have the happily ever after.
But then the happily ever after is more satisfying when I've had soul destroying breakup, because then I cry because they go back together.
Yeah, yeah. But you need the two. That's the yin and yang. They go together. And I would argue that all genre fiction has a guaranteed something.
Yeah.
You know, if you didn't read genre fiction and it was just the soul destroying breakup, you wouldn't go back to that author again. You'd get to the end of the book and it would be, well, there's going to be another book, right? And then when there wasn't another book to finish the arc, you'd be like, what? I'm not reading her again.
Yeah. It'd be like a cozy mystery book, not finding the murderer.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Or a cozy mystery book where the detective character dies at the end. It would just be like, wait, that's not what I signed up for.
Or doesn't get exonerated.
Yes, yeah. So genre fiction guarantees something. It's all about bringing order out of chaos. Now, what kind of order out of what kind of chaos depends on the genre. In a romance, it's that emotional and personal order that comes out of the chaos. There's the chaos of falling in love, and then the chaos of whatever soul-destroying breakup happens. But then in the end, order is restored. And in mysteries, it's the solving of the crime. Again, the chaos is the crime, and the solving of the crime, the justice is restored. It's order out of chaos on a civic level. In sci-fi fantasy, it's more epic and grand. It's sort of a cosmic bringing order out of chaos there. So this idea that genre fiction is all about the soul soothing that happens when we see order being restored, that's the arc of justice. And we don't get to see that in real life very often. I mean, yes, a lot of us have long-term relationships and romantic partners and things like that. But if we have a long-term romantic partner, we certainly don't see the order out of personal chaos over and over again, because that would not be a long-term partner. We often don't see it on a civic scale or a global scale at all. You know, if you think about how long it took to find Tupac's killer. I'm not even a rap fan, and even I'm indignant that it took 27 years for them to find his killer and bring his killer to justice. That is a long arc of justice. So we read fiction because we want to shorten that arc of justice. We want to bring it down into a palatable, consumable nugget that we can descend into a world for 2 hours, or in the case of a Taylor Swift song, 5 minutes, and we can see that arc of justice happen.
Just as a side note, have you seen the comments about how all cold cases should be handed over to Swifties because they'd be solved?
I have not, but yes, clearly.
It's so true.
Yeah. All cold case crimes should be handed over to Swifties. I would be in favor of that. That would be awesome.
We need exercising in between albums, like Easter eggs.
Yes.
Now that there's a certain camp that thinks repetitions are coming until 2025.
Oh.
I think we need extra stimulations from somewhere.
Yeah. So, Taylor, if you're listening, get on that. Just motivate us. Just
Yeah. Just give a hint.
Yeah. We'll be like all over it. So, I mean, of course, we all know that in reality, life isn't fair. We all know that. We believe that. That's just the way it is. But we want to escape into genre fiction because we want to believe that there is a world where it can be fair and where justice comes. That's why we read. I think that's why we read genre fiction.
And us as writers, as authors, it's why we write.
Yeah.
We write to create this world that matches the world we want to exist in our heads, or to develop towards the world we want to exist in our heads.
Yeah.
And it can be seen, as we've talked about in past episodes, society has changed as fiction has evolved, and how we depict certain parts of life changes with every couple of years, and movements come along and fiction's right there with it, holding it up.
Yeah. In the past week, I've been thinking about the conversation we had about how consent is more important in novels as it has become more important in society. Like you see consent in novels in a way that you didn't, gosh, certainly in the classic bodice rippers, you never saw. There was no consent.
Yeah. That's something I'm grappling with my first paranormal romance novella, because it's a spell-induced non-con situation.
Yeah.
Like, both of them, and if they had a choice, would not be involved, but the spell and the deal forces it. And I'm grappling with it because I then have to write trigger warnings. Even though there's the spell aspect, I need to write a trigger warning.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, and this is why trigger warnings exist, right? We have to trust that the fantasy, that the non-con fantasy exists outside of what people want in real life. That's why it is a fantasy. So one of the reasons that I feel like books that are set in the real world have become more reflective of that real world boundary that is being set by society, there is then a place for things like paranormal and sci-fi where those rules don't exist. So the rules of our world don't exist because there is magic and because there are characters who don't understand the rules of our world. So those books become popular because they tap into a fantasy that women don't want to experience in real life, but want to experience in the fantasy world. But we give trigger warnings so that if you don't want to experience that fantasy in fantasy world, you know ahead of time.
Yeah. You can skip it.
And it comes down to trusting the reader enough to
know themselves.
Yeah, to know themselves and to know those lines for them and all that kind of stuff. I think just to tie it back to Taylor Swift and the song of the week that we're talking about, No Body, No Crime, I think we can safely assume that Taylor is not giving us a roadmap for how to kill your friend's cheating husband. She trusts that we are enjoying it as a story. And it's a great little story. It's this perfect little amuse-bouche of crime fiction. So for anyone who doesn't know the story, I'm going to break it down a little bit. Esty has the cheating husband. And he's not just cheating on her, but he's using their money from their joint account to buy jewelry for some other woman. It's like, that's just somehow makes it a little worse that he's using her money to spoil this other woman. And when she confronts him about it, she disappears from the chorus of No Body, No Crime. We know that justice isn't going to be served by the traditional forces. And I think that's an important key, because in this shortened arc of justice that she's providing for us, if we really thought that the police had it under control, we would not necessarily advocate for her to take matters into her own hands. But we know the police, the local police, are not going to be able to do anything because there's no body. And then we see all these clues so that we know that, and I'm going to call the character who is taking action here Taylor, even though it's obviously not actually Taylor, but the singer, Taylor. We know that she knows the husband actually did it. Because again, if we doubted that the husband did it, we would not be able to advocate for her to take this action. And we also know that she's going to be able to get away with it. So there's all of these moments in the song where it could be emotionally unsatisfying, but it's not, because Taylor handles it perfectly. We're thrilled that she's committing murder in defense of her friend or to avenge her friend. So all of these things line up to make this perfectly satisfying little arc of justice. Taylor gets revenge. The mistress gets suspected of murder. The actual murderer gets a watery grave. The sister gets the satisfaction of helping to bring her sister's killer to justice. Esty is avenged. And all of that comes down to this thing that I say about genre fiction all the time, which is every character gets what they deserve. And these are things I don't do before I start a book. This is one of those things I do in revisions is I look at the scope of what the character deserves and sort of meter it out so that it matches the character's importance. Morgana, have you heard the phrase dispatch bad guys in ascending order?
No. What does that mean?
So if you're doing something that's very plot heavy and you're in the second half of the second act before you're like leading up to the big conclusion, you want your characters to confront the big bad last. So you have to dispatch all the cadre of bad guys in ascending order. You start with the lowest and they knock him out first, him or her. And then you go to the next one and then the next one and then the next one so that the climax actually happens with the big bad. So if you think about like how unsatisfying it would be if you're writing a fantasy, if they dispatched the big bad first, and then they spent the last half of the novel sort of cleaning up the little guys.
It's anticlimactic,
Yeah, that would be like, what? And in reality, that's probably how any of these things would happen in real life. You would probably take out the big bad first. But in genre fiction, that's what's satisfying.
So talking about things that I do instinctually, apparently that's one of them.
Yeah. And a lot of authors are this way. You're just sort of tapped into whatever it is that makes fiction great, because I'm a big believer that these stories come to us from somewhere else, whether it's the muse or your subconscious or the collective unconscious, whatever it is. For writers like you and I who are somewhere on that Panther scale, we don't do this stuff consciously. But if you're a writer and you get to the end of your book and you're like, there's something that feels off, these are things you can look for. Because sometimes when you're doing things subconsciously, it doesn't come out in the perfect order. And then you have to go back and like slightly reorder things.
But this is why our first drafts are always an absolute stay.
Yeah. And why you need beta readers. You know, the beta reader who's like, yeah, it was great until, I don't know, I felt unsatisfied about something. You know, if you look at the song, we have no indication that the mistress actually participated in the murder, right? So if the mistress had been murdered, but hadn't been involved in the murder, that would be unsatisfying.
Yeah, would have lost sympathy.
Right. We want to trust that the Taylor character, the person singing, got it all right, that she got the perfect amount of justice for the cheating husband who murdered his wife and the perfect amount of justice for the mistress who was complicit but not active.
So I worked in TV. To become a full-time author, I quit TV, and one of the shows I worked on was an American crime show. Factual, so it goes back and looks at cases that have closed, generally have closed, to tell a complete story. And I half wonder if part of the appeal of crime fiction is getting that sense of justice, because we see so many cases and maybe people experience these unjust murders, unjust crimes that are never dealt with. They get a sense of satisfaction then from watching it, reading it, seeing it get complete.
Yeah. Well, you think about even just all of the times in our everyday lives where we don't get the whole story and we wish we did. You know, you think about the time when you're driving down the road and you pass an accident scene, right? Or you're stuck in traffic because you're stuck behind an accident that happened and you don't get the story. You get this like slice of the story and you don't know who is driving. Are they hurt? Did they walk away? Those things are like there in your head. We don't get to know how that worked out. We have this instinctual desire to understand the ending. It's almost compulsive and we want the whole story. And we don't get it in real life nearly often enough. So we read, we listen to music.
Yeah, I think you just described the drive that makes authors write.
Yes.
We'll get an idea from somewhere and it'll be a snippet and we'll be like, what happens next?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or I'll come up with a breakup and I'm like, how do I put them back together?
Yes. Well, like yesterday, I was driving out to my parents' house and they live in a small town outside of a small town that's outside of Boston. So I'm driving through this small town and there's this huge 18-wheeler next to me. Classic US 18-wheeler. I did not even glimpse the guy driving it. I don't even know for sure if it was a guy driving it. But the cab has this beautiful, like green, glossy, shimmery coat of paint. And then there's like a picture painted, gorgeous art, worthy of a fantasy cover of a dragon and a blonde, sort of princessy type with her hands on the dragon. It's not like weird and sexualized the way you might imagine. It was just beautiful fantasy art. And I was like, who is that person driving that big 18-wheeler? Because it's the juxtaposition of the 18-wheeler and the kind of person I usually see getting in and out of 18-wheelers when I stop on the side of the road. And this like gorgeous fantasy art. I was like, there's something there.
Isn't this what you were talking about last week with the cognitive dissonance?
Yes, exactly. Anytime there's that cognitive dissonance, that moment where you're like, these two things do not fit. And the writer in me, I mean, okay, so let's just say probably this is just someone who happens to be a fan of fantasy and drives a truck and has a lot of time to listen to audiobooks. That's probably what it is. But the writer in me created this whole complex story world in which there is a sub-world to the US trucking industry in which there are dragons and magic and they are like driving around the country fighting demons. Because again, I want a bigger story. Anytime you have that cognitive dissonance, in the case of No Body, No Crime, it is the cognitive dissonance of the husband who is drinking Merlot and she doesn't drink Merlot, and the jewelry that there's cognitive dissonance there. And then a story comes out and we read stories or listen to music or whatever because we're trying to close that cognitive loop, right? And as writers, yes, you are exactly right. We experience that in real life. We want a story. We want the whole story. So we create it for ourselves.
This kind of ties into our next episode, in which I kind of look at how Taylor Swift builds a community. You have that point in time where she stopped talking about the source material of her song and she left us to speculate. Just as a general Swiftie that fuels the fires, and you talk to other Swifties and the cycle keeps going and going and going until the community gets bigger. As a romance author, you hear one of these songs and your brain pings off with so many variations of where this song came from, what it means, what the characters look like, what their story is, and how you fix it.
Yes.
Because we're always looking for a fix.
Absolutely.
Maybe this is why so many romance authors are Taylor Swift fans. She leaves too much ambiguity for us.
Yeah. Because her songs are so emotionally fraught and they're like the perfect fodder for a romance novel. And she purposefully often leaves that arc open so that we want to play more in the story. Like that's one of those ways that she keeps us engaged, right? Is she's always feeding us clues. She's always dribbling out the story a little bit and we're there for it.
Yeah, leaving us clues like fake website page errors that have anagrams for red herring on them before she drops a new album announcement.
Yes. Yeah.
Back to the arc of fiction.
Yes. So I have a note here that we can also talk about Bad Blood and the video of You Need to Calm Down, because I feel like for me personally, knowing Bad Blood is obviously about Katy Perry, I enjoyed seeing her show up in the video because it felt like it was satisfying for me to see them knit some relationship back together. Are they going to be besties? Probably not, right? But there was forgiveness there, and forgiveness is part of justice also. Because again, the punishment should fit the crime.
So this is a hole in my Swift knowledge. What did she do?
This is not a hole in my knowledge, but I'm not deep into it, but there was something, gosh, I know that it had something to do with backup dancers and like they had some of the same backup dancers, I think.
I am looking it up.
Yeah, I paused because I could see that Morgana is Googling things.
Okay, to summarize, after a little break of Googling, Katy Perry had 3 backup dancers ask permission to go on Taylor Swift's tour. She said yes, told them to put a contingency in their contracts for a 30-day break for when she went back out on tour. And when that time came, they got fired. And Katy Perry blamed Taylor Swift.
Yes.
What else was behind that? We have no clue. But now I understand what the hell happened.
Yes, there was bad blood, but it was kind of time for it to be over. Katy Perry shows up in the You Need to Calm Down video, and they give the little like hamburger French fry hug, which I think is a sign of like, okay, we're not the same, but we can compliment one another. And it felt like justice. It felt like, yeah, it was time to set that aside. And that in the scope of bigger conflicts, that one no longer felt important. And it felt like justice, which is what we come to genre fiction for.
So I guess the thing here is that Taylor writes this arc of justice, but she also writes it for herself in this case. And I guess she does it with her breakup songs too. We're all currently speculating about the contents of the new album. By the time this releases, the new album may be out and I may be losing my mind. But I think that'll be the same thing. We get Lover, we get to experience their love at the start. We've had Evermore and Folklore where they've developed as co-writers, and some songs are about her and some songs are fictional, but all of them, her idea of love at that point was inspired by Joe. And then we got Midnights, the way we were sure was a breakup album, but now if we're getting an actual breakup album, what was Midnights? I don't know, but that's an arc.
Yeah, it's a big arc. And I don't know about you, but and I don't know if we're ready to talk about this kind of thing on this episode, but I was re-listening to Champagne Problems and I'm like, I always thought that was about Tom, but was Champagne Problems about Joe?
Yeah, maybe. I kind of always thought it was. In the end, when they broke up, I thought it was.
Yeah,
but that's completely off topic. We should maybe wrap this one up.
We should. I don't know that there's anything to say other than I think the way she handles that arc of justice in No Body, No Crime, there's things that writers can learn from it. Even if you write instinctively, I think there's all kinds of lessons you can learn about craft that will help cement those instincts in the back of your head while you're writing.
And just a quick thought, just because you introduce an arc into a book, say you write standalones and you're introducing an arc about a specific character going through something, it doesn't mean you have to wrap up the arc in that book. I'm just thinking about, I have a character in Chasing Alice who gets cheated on. And she goes through this whole thing with the drummer of the band, and it's a really bad situation. And then if a reader hasn't read Needing Emily, they have no idea what happened to Emily.
Yeah.
I gave her Happily Ever After in an arc with a different musician in a novella separate to it. But if they've never done that journey through my catalog, they have no idea.
Well, and I think that's one way that romance writers can drive readership to other books. And this is a thing we all do instinctively, but you open an arc and leave it open for a minor character. Or if you're writing books that are a trilogy with all the same characters, you give some sort of completion and then you open the arc again in the epilogue or at the end of the last chapter. So these are ways that you can drive readership to go to additional books, is to pose a question, open an arc, leave justice unresolved for some character. And if you're writing a trilogy where it's all the same characters, you can leave that arc open for the entire trilogy. If you're writing a series of books where they are standalones, but they are linked, you want to make sure that you close the arc for the main characters, but you can leave the arc open for minor characters. And the extent that you do this with side characters to drive readers to other books is cool. It's a skill. It's something that readers love. They want that drive. And they want to know where to go for the next one. They want to know where to go to finish the arc, right?
Yeah.
Wrap it up as we always do with first asking our listeners if there's any songs that they see that arc of justice in that they want to talk to us about. We would love to know that. And then also with what song we're listening to right now. What are you deep diving on?
Right now it hits different from Midnight. And the reason of this is not actually lyrical. It's because somebody on Instagram pulled out some words that feature in Hits Different that are featuring in some of Taylor's teasers for the new album. And yes, it's got my brain squirreling away.
Nice.
Wondering what surprise is going to come out of this. So we basically have 2 months to wait to fulfill that surprise.
Yeah. For me, it's The Last Time. I've been listening to that one on repeat, and I'm not quite sure why, other than it's a very haunting song. It's very sad. And I've just been, not that I've been sad, but I've been diving onto that one and just listening to it over and over again.
Was that the one that you messaged me and said you were listening to from Red?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think part of it has got to be the sound of it. It's just gorgeous.
Yes.
Makes you just want to lie down and shut your eyes and enjoy.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's a gorgeous song.
That is us for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in.
As always, hit us up for what you're listening to and loving right now. We'll see you later.